Welcome to the Power of Now What, a podcast on overcoming the various challenges and problems that one encounters when on the spiritual path, when on a spiritual journey, when engaged in a practice or discipline such as meditation, and even post-awakening and post-enlightenment itself. This is episode 11 on a very difficult subject, the subject of how we address suffering in the world when we are engaged in a practice of finding our own inner peace, when finding our own liberation from our own suffering. There is a dilemma that begins to happen when you awaken and find inner peace, because as you transcend your own suffering, you will naturally have the insight of, well, that's all very well and good for me, but what about everyone else? Am I not just checking out of all of the problems around me? And how can I, in good conscience and in good faith, sit in total peace and serenity whilst knowing that there is immense suffering that is occurring in the world? How can this be done? Well, it's a very valid dilemma. It's a valid question. It's a very valid problem. And in fact, it's probably the most legitimate objection. It's the only one that I've ever heard that, if ever I've spoken about inner peace and awakening and enlightenment, sometimes the objection will come in from the external world of, well, how can you find inner peace when there is so much suffering in the world? It's a very valid dilemma. I'd like to discuss that dilemma today. Let's explore it. Let's see if we can observe some of the common problems, some of the common issues that arise around this subject, a little bit on my experience of it, and hopefully some pointers and perspectives that might help us to overcome this dilemma. Can this, and also answer the question, can this dilemma be overcome at all? Maybe it can't. So, I mean, I'll preface this by saying, look, you have to remember that you matter too. That's the first thing I'd like to say, is your own suffering is valid, and it's important to overcome your own suffering. Overcoming your own suffering will help the world around you. I just want to say that straight out of the gate. It is not selfish to overcome your own suffering. In fact, it is one of the most important and crucial things that you can do for humanity. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. And please understand, as I say all of this, understand that your suffering matters too. Socrates said, "If all our misfortunes were laid in one common heap, whence everyone must take an equal portion, most people would be content to take their own and depart." And maybe to slightly translate that, because that's quite old language being used there. But if everyone in the world took all of their suffering, all of their pain, all of their misery, each individual took all of their problems, and we could all throw it into one pile in the middle, and we all stood around this pile and looked at the pile of suffering in the center, most of us would be content to say, actually, the problems that I have, the suffering that I have, taking a look at the suffering that everyone else has, actually, yeah, I think I'm content with the ones that I got given. I'm not happy about it, obviously, but the ones that I got given, if I look at the whole thing, if I look at the entire pile here and what everyone else is dealing with, yeah, maybe the ones that landed at my doorstep, maybe they're not quite so bad after all, and we'd be happy to take our own home again. And I'm happy to work on the ones that I got. there's a really good meditative exercise that you can do if you ever are feeling like you've had a really bad run in life and you've had really bad luck and it's not fair, that sort of feeling. A really good little meditative exercise that you can do. Do this with me now. So what we can do is say you've gone to a very powerful entity. You could say God, you could say the universe, you could say a genie, whatever, and say, look, I'm suffering too much. This is too much. My problems are overwhelming and unbearable. And the genie or God or the universe or whatever this entity says, okay, fine. I agree. This is a lot. This is a lot. What I can do for you is take all of that away, all of the suffering, all of the pain. And what we're going to do, you're going to forget all about everything. But what we're going to do is this life that you're living now never happened. We're just going to completely erase it. And what we'll do is we'll put you back in. You can start again. You can completely start again on this earth with a totally blank slate. The only caveat is that it will be a completely random choice, that you will arrive back on earth at any point in history, at anywhere in the world, and it's going to be completely random. There's no choice about this. It'll just be a totally random roll of the dice. Would you do it? Would you take that chance? Most people, I would say, probably wouldn't. Probably wouldn't. And that's a really good little exercise that you can do to kind of put your own life into perspective and help you to feel like maybe it's not so unfair after all, actually. Like the roll of the dice that I got in this life, well, I could have rolled better. I could have rolled a lot worse as well. But there are also they're just fair is fair. There probably are quite a few people who would say, yeah, you know what, actually, yeah, I would roll those dice. So what is the spiritual dilemma right here? And why is it a barrier to fully liberating yourself from suffering? Well, there is a paradox that happens because as you become more and more peaceful in yourself, your own inner peace begins to grow, becomes an effortless sense of serenity, an effortless sense of peace and joy. You also become more compassionate. This is something that happens naturally as you begin to become more aware and aligned with the understanding, the felt sense that everything is one, that we have one singular, infinite, universal, shared consciousness. We are not all individuals, we are all the same singular, infinite whole. As you align with this, the individual body mind naturally becomes far more compassionate. Now, this presents the dilemma of how can the individual reconcile the fact that you are finding peace whilst becoming more and more aware of the suffering around you and wanting to help more than ever, wanting to alleviate the suffering more than ever, because now even the stranger on the street, you love them as if they were your own family. Even people that previously you haven't got on with very well, even people, the difficult people at work, the people who you're in conflict with, you have a disagreement with, even your boss, your manager who you don't get on with, and all of these people, everyone, every single person now starts to feel like a close, dear family member, and you don't want them to suffer. You just don't. And this can create that kind of inner turbulence that, if left unchecked and not understood and not investigated fully, can pull you back into ego identification and can pull you out of the liberated and awakened state and back into a personal suffering. And let's not forget the intensity of the goal. We are trying to permanently liberate the individual from individual, egoic, mind identified suffering. So, as you find this inner peace, you become more aware of the suffering, you become more compassionate, you want to help the people around you more than ever. You also start to get this sense of the futility of trying to change and fix the world. This is something that just starts to happen as you mature and grow older as well, as you just start to feel a sense of even if I wanted to fix the world, how on earth are we going to go about doing it? So this is what I'd like to speak to today is let's discuss this issue. Now, I don't know what to do about all of the suffering in the world. That's not what I can help with. I mean, it solving all of the suffering on earth is probably slightly outside the scope of this podcast. But what I can help with is helping the individual to come to terms with and find peace with their own individual contribution to the world. Now, liberating yourself from your own suffering is the most beneficial thing that you can do for humanity. So that is priority number one. Always keep that first and foremost. First, alleviate your own suffering. Liberate yourself from this suffering. It's like when you know how they say if you're on a plane and they say, right, in the event of an emergency, when the masks come down, the oxygen masks drop down from the from the overhead cabin here, what you must do is put your own on first before trying to help anyone else with their own mask, even if that's your own kids. And you would think that's a bit selfish, isn't it? What, you put your own mask on first? No, no, no. What you need to do is help everyone else first and then get to your own mask. But the reason for that is if there's no oxygen and you don't put your own mask on, you're going out. You're done. And if you're out and you're done because you've passed out, you're not going to be able to help anyone anyway. And that is there's a very deep analogy there. There's a fantastic explanatory power to metaphor and analogy, because if you're not awake and you're not liberated, your behavior will be so unconscious that even if you had the best intention, you're only going to cause more suffering in the world because you are technically unconscious. And this frantic rushing around trying to fix and help anyone, more often than not, causes more problems. But if you liberate and awaken yourself first, all of your action, all of your words, all of your deeds, all of your thoughts will be informed by the infinite, universal, loving light of consciousness. You will act wiser, more compassionately, more considered, more reasonable, more rational. And by doing that, it will help other people more. You can then assist people in putting their own mask on. And in that calmness and assuredness, there's no crisis. I'm going to pop my mask on and then I'm going to help people with their own. But if you frantically rush around trying to help other people with theirs first, you're going out and then we all die. It's as simple as that, basically. Now, I don't believe to tell you how awful the suffering in the world can be. And I probably will just give a little bit of a trigger warning here, is that this is going to pull us into some fairly dark territory because we have to give the appropriate and dignified gravity of the situation. I cannot make any light of this. The suffering in the world is immense and unbearable. How awful, truly awful it can be. It is. It will keep you up at night if you start thinking about it, because it the horror, the horror of the situations that occur. We all know about them. We all know them. It gets so dark that it's unthinkable, truly unthinkable. Now, I don't believe I need to go into too many specifics about this, but it's worth having an understanding of the gravity, of the depth of the horror that occurs in the world. The suffering has to stop. It has to. At some point on Earth, this cannot continue. I'd like to just the first time I came across this feeling of the pit in your stomach feeling when you witness the horrors of the world is back in year 8. I was a brat. I was the class clown, always joking around. I was desperate for people to like me, and I decided the way to do that was to make everyone around me laugh, and make jokes. And I would clown around in class. I would disrupt the class all the time. Just if I could get a laugh, then that was it. If that was a good day, if I got people to laugh, and I didn't care how I made that happen. And I was part of that little group of lads who are just awful at school. Everyone knows them. Little snot-nosed brats, you know. And one day we were in a history class, and it was another one of those days where I was like, right, I'm going to go in today and cause as much chaos as possible. I'm going to make everyone laugh, and let's have another crack at making a big joke about the whole thing today. But I knew in history we were learning about World War II, and there was something about the atmosphere as we went into the class that day. This was in the morning before our morning break, the lesson before morning break, and there was just something strange about the atmosphere. I just didn't really feel that much like joking today, and couldn't really quite put my finger on why. And our teacher, who's usually, fairly good-natured, fairly good-humored, and usually quite cheerful, he had a strange countenance about him that day too. He seemed a little bit more morose, a little bit more sullen than he usually was. And when we all sat down and it was a little bit quiet, and we all felt it. We all felt what is this today? What's happening here today? The energy feels weird in here today. And the teacher wheeled in those TVs, the old cathode ray tube TVs, the big one they wheel in on the stand. And he brought the stand in and he had a video. And he said, today, kids, we're going to be learning about the Holocaust. And everyone felt, right, well, that's what this atmosphere is about. And I didn't really feel like making any jokes at that point. And he said it's the only time that a teacher ever said this in any school. He said, if anybody wants to not watch this, if anybody doesn't want to take part in this lesson, you can go and sit outside. Go and sit in the library for an hour, and we'll see you at the end. And quite a few kids actually left. They could sense it. They could feel something's off. Something's not right here. And some of the other students actually left. And I thought there was a feeling in me, because I had this dilemma inside. I was like, right, do I sit and watch this? And if I sit and watch this, why am I going to sit and watch this? Is this out of morbid curiosity? Is this because I just can't look away? Am I staying here because I truly want to know? Or is this, I don't want to miss out on something? I couldn't quite place it, but I decided to stay. And I believe the feeling was one of I need to see this. I need to see, as uncomfortable as this is going to be, as horrible as this is going to be, it's important to see this. And he told us, he began teaching us about what happened. I'm not going to go into details about what happened. We all know what happened. He told us the details about what went on at that time, and then he showed us a video. And this was a video of all the clips that are not sanitized at all. This was the raw footage of some of the aftermath, some of the horrors. We've all seen those images. And it was sorry. It was the scene with the bulldozer. The scene with the bulldozer. I don't know if you've seen it. If you haven't, don't look it up. Don't. But if you've seen it, you know the one I mean. And something changed. After that lesson, it was silent. We left that room in silence. The teacher didn't tell us to be quiet or give any respect, and it just happened naturally. We just left after that, and it was break time after that. Now, usually, me and the boys would be laughing and joke. We'd go running around the playground, causing havoc and causing trouble, but not today, not this time. We stood around in silence, and the feeling, the horror, the feeling in the pit of your stomach, the sinking, and the shivers down the back of your neck. And there's no feeling like that. It's the feeling, in many ways, I feel like that day I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't, my naivety was gone, stripped away. I couldn't laugh and joke around that day. I'm not saying I never laughed and joked around again. You know, you kind of you forget, and then, you know, later you just go back to your old ways. But that day I was out, and I feel like in many ways my innocence kind of was gone. I'd seen something. I'd seen it. That's the depth of horror that humanity is capable of. The depth of suffering that it's possible to experience in this world, in recent history, at our doorstep. Now, for one thing, in some ways, I realized and recognized the importance of seeing things like that. And actually, I wonder if our technology, our communication technology, the video, the audio, our ability to connect and distribute these sorts of videos is a blessing for humanity. For all its faults, it is important to see in its raw entirety exactly what has happened. As horrible, as unpalatable, as horrifying as these things are, it's important to see them in their raw intensity with no sanitization. Because previously, before any of these videos, the only way that you'd have heard about these things is through stories. And stories become narratives, and narratives are often sanitized. So if you think before, like back in the Middle Ages, before any sort of communication technology, what will have happened is people will have told stories about great battles and about and will have left out the gory details. And it's similar to when you see action movies and you see wars in certain action movies, and war looks like a blast, doesn't it? It's like in certain action movies, they found a way to make violence look exciting, like it's entertaining. This is great to watch. Let's go. It's a right laugh. It's only when you watch the more realistic films of it, like, you see war films like The Pianist or Schindler's List or something, and you go, oh, now that they're not pulling any punches. Now, before we had the communication technology, you would only be able to see very sanitized versions of violence, and the gory details would be left out. And there's that phenomena of history is written by the winners, and obviously we never say about our own atrocities. We only say it's the enemy that's in the wrong. So in one sense, it's necessary to observe this. It's necessary to see it. And I think in many ways, actually, the internet has been a blessing for humanity, in that there's no hiding away from it. Not only that, we went from narrowcast, because it used to be that you would only see the things that the powers that wanted to be could show you. But then the internet comes out, and suddenly you have access to many different sources of information, and you're much better informed about the things that they don't want you to see, the areas of suffering that the powers that be don't want you to see. And they, yeah, I'll get to a little bit more of that later. So, one of the insights that might arise on this path is that, hang on a minute, the greatest suffering that humanity has ever endured is by our own hand. The worst things that could ever happen to people is usually caused by people. It's I mean the thing about World War II and the Holocaust, what's truly horrifying is that's not the only time that's happened. It's not even the worst. It's happened throughout history. It's not even that uncommon. That's terrifying. If that doesn't terrify you, it should. It happens pretty regularly. That's not an isolated incident. I think we documented it better. We're far more aware of it, but it happens all over, and it's happened often. And so, how interesting then that we look at all the fates that can befall you, of all the horrors that can happen during a human lifetime. The very worst of it is at the hands of other people. Now, that could be a very depressing fact, and it leads a lot of people to despair. And it's not long after seeing some images like that that you think humanity is awful. Humanity's just doomed. It's not a massive stretch of the imagination, and it's logical to look at images like that and say, yep, human beings are just evil. They're just the worst. However, I would say that doesn't help. That method of thinking doesn't help, because we can't say all humans are like that. We need to understand what happened there. Change will only happen with awareness and true compassion and understanding. We need to look at images like that, and our gut instinct goes to anger and rage. And if left unchecked and without consciousness, without conscious awareness, the rage and anger at the injustice that we witness only becomes more hatred. It just becomes a self-hatred, because it's so painful to witness, to see in its raw intensity the horrors of the world. It's so painful that we package that pain up in anger, rage, and eventually hatred. That hatred eventually will turn to violence, and that violence creates more suffering. The violence creates more trauma. The violence creates more horror. And that cycle repeats ad infinitum until we can elevate in consciousness, elevate up above our own gut reaction. If we can elevate up over our own anger, and instead of turning towards the anger and hatred that we are so disgusted by, instead of turning towards that, instead rise above and understand it. We need to be aware of what's happened so that we can stop it from happening. And it is in the light of awareness that we can have true understanding, because the compassion needs to extend to everyone. And this is leaping over the moon. It feels impossible, but one must have compassion for the one who was driving the bulldozer as well. One must have compassion for that being, because they are just as lost, just as traumatized, just as horrified as anyone else in that situation. The guards too, the guards and the prisoners are all one, and everyone is suffering. Now, so as we come to see the suffering, the greatest suffering humanity has endured is by its own hand, we can fall into despair. But let's look at this. Let's try and think of a solution here. Let's try and think of something positive, because if we're doing it to ourselves, then it means we can stop. It means that if it's something that we do, if it's our actions, if it's our behaviors and our words and our thoughts and our feelings that are causing this, then it's within our power to eradicate this. It's within our power to change this. Like, it was one of the insights I had when I was suffering from addiction and I was drinking, is that, well, hang on a minute, this is a problem that I'm creating. And that can lead to despair, but despair is the addiction. Despair is just another facet of the addiction. And if I'm doing this to myself, then I can stop. And that is hope. That is hope. If I'm doing this to myself, then I can stop. And if we understand humanity as a whole, as a singular organism, not as 8 billion separate individuals, but as one singular unified consciousness, one day we're going to wake up and realize, oh, we're doing this to ourselves. This isn't some external force doing this to us. This isn't some dark, negative, evil energy. It's us. It's us. It's within us. And if it's in us, then we are in power to change it. And we can do it. It's just a matter of waking up to the reality of the situation. People recover from awful things that we thought we would never recover from. My addiction was the same. My obesity was the same. In many ways, so was my anxiety and my depression. I realized that all of these things I'm doing to myself. I can overcome this. And I believe that's where humanity will go. As the communication technology improves and we can grow in awareness, and we can try to elevate and overcome our base primal gut reactions, emotional, egoic reactions to things. That's the key. We need to become more conscious. That's it. If we stopped thinking of things in terms of good and evil, good and bad, right and wrong, and instead thought of things as conscious or unconscious, because there are many people walking around almost fully unconscious, not conscious of their own behaviors, just trapped in a frantic, stressed, angry mind state all the time, fearful, afraid, angry, and that is highly unconscious. If we can become more conscious, think of things more in terms of conscious and unconscious rather than good and bad, rather than right and wrong. Because the general worldview of humanity is very negative, and that's only leading to more problems than it's solving. The general worldview is that, well, humanity's awful. Humanity is doomed. We're destroying the planet. We're destroying each other. We're making a right pig's ear of the whole thing. It's just, everything's just going to hell fast. And the only solution is that we need to get off the planet. We need to jump in rockets and get off the planet and go off to Mars. And that's the solution to the suffering. It's not. It's not. That's not how it's going to work, I'm afraid. There's no getting off it. There's no getting away from it. It's just like our own individual liberation in itself. That it's not about escaping. It's not about getting away from anything. It's not about destroying anything. There's like movements that are saying like, well, humanity is just awful. That we need to get rid of humans. Humans are the problem. We need to get rid of them. It doesn't work like that. We have to work with what we've got. We have to look after what we've got. We have to improve what we have. We can't just destroy it. We can't run away from it. We're going to have to just heal. We're going to have to do the work. It's as simple as that. Now, we get this general approach in very unconscious people who become aware of the suffering in the world. We get this very egoic approach of this shallow token activism. And I've been bigging up communication technology, saying, oh, it's great that we can see and become aware of things, but it also has massive detriment as well, and huge downsides too, because social media gives rise to a lot of illusions and delusions as well, because social media gives people an easy outlet to write something and say that therefore a lot of people want to demonstrate that they are compassionate. A lot of people want to look good, but there are very few people who want to be good, because being good takes work and sacrifice, but looking good is easy, particularly when you have access to social media. You can share a post saying about this going on in the world, and all you have to do in 2 clicks, you've shared a post, and everyone goes, oh, bravo, well done, you're really spreading awareness about this issue, so thank you to you. You must be such a compassionate person to do that. It took less than a couple of seconds to do it, and it's this shallow token activism that social media has given rise to, where people can come across like the most compassionate people on earth, and yet they've never lifted a finger to actually do anything. And it's worth becoming aware of that, becoming aware of the individuals, the beings who are coming across like they're really trying to help in the world. But then if you investigate a little closer, you can see, hang on, but what do you actually do? You talk a big game, you talk it up, you say the right things, but what do you actually do? And it's often those people you think, but actually, they are the most egoic, the most self-centered, self-serving people you could ever meet. If you've ever noticed as well, often people share like information, particularly about these like social causes as well, that they have particular vested interest in. It's like they want to improve their own circumstances, and they think if they change the world to fit what they would like it to be, then their own individual circumstances would improve. Utterly egoic, highly identified as the individual. But if people are more invested in causes that they have no vested interest in, that might be a sign that somebody's probably a bit more conscious and a little bit more awake, and more so actually doing something about it, because a lot of it is about the work and the sacrifice that is necessary to even make a dent in the suffering in the world. It could take an entire lifetime to make the smallest dent in the suffering in the world. I'll get to that in a moment. So we have this, the fake activism, the illusion of doing something has become rife, rife. And I think a lot of people fall into the trap of doing this because you can be so easily manipulated through your compassionate instincts. And this happens far more commonly, I believe, than people would like to think, because everyone likes to think that they couldn't be manipulated. I couldn't be manipulated. I couldn't be delusional. Not a chance. I'm too smart for that. I'm just too intelligent to be manipulated. But and you are intelligent, you are analytical, you are aware. But so's the enemy, and they're very the people are very good at finding ways around your logic and finding ways around your better judgment and your common sense. And one of the ways that this can be done is through your compassion, through your compassionate instincts. You can be manipulated by somebody saying, oh, you know, good people do this. This is some people who are good, people who are moral, people who are virtuous, they act in this way. This is what they do. And anyone listening to that would be, oh, well, I want to be a good person. I want to be moral, because you have good, genuine, compassionate instincts. You want to be a good person. You want to be moral. And if you trust the person who's saying, and this is the way you do it, this is the way you act morally, this is the way you act in a virtuous way, then that's how you'll act. That's how you behave. Now, because of that mechanism in humanity, it's not long until somebody with very poor intentions, ill intent, evil intent comes along and goes, great, now I've found a way to influence people's actions and behavior by manipulating their own compassion. That's the most evil and demonic thing imaginable, and it happens all the time, not just on national global scale, but in your daily life with the people that you interact with daily. People are very good at doing this, you know, to do the right thing. But have you ever noticed that when somebody says, we need to do the right thing, that right thing is often what they want to happen on an egoic level? Do the right thing. Are you sure that's the right thing, or isn't that just what you want to happen? Like, managers do this all the time. Any workplace, any managers are going to make a big deal about, the virtue of hard work. It's very moral and very just to really dig in and grind out and work extra hard. It's like, well, that's convenient, isn't it? Because that means that the company's going to perform better, and then that looks good on you, doesn't it? So that's really convenient that this that working hard for Tesco is a really virtuous thing to do and is the right thing to do. That's wow, it's just wow, that's very serendipitous that doing the right thing also just happens to align with your own personal egoic goals. So wow, it's good luck for you, isn't it? It happens all the time. Oh, doing the right thing, doing the virtuous thing. Oh, which also happens to be exactly what I want to happen as well. Oh, honestly. Oh, so just being aware of how manipulated you can be, and so often we feel like we walk around like, oh, I need to do more about this. I need to do more about this cause. I need to do more about that cause. But just check in with yourself and say, hang on a minute, does this actually align with my own morals, values, opinions? Does it really? Or have I been led down this path? Is this something I do genuinely care about? Or a lot of it is about the awareness of what you arrived with, your own particular intuition and instinct. Because some of the greatest atrocities on earth were committed by people firmly convinced that they were doing the right thing. How tragic is that? Because people come along and manipulate people's sense of compassion and righteousness. And it's not long until that leads to awful things happening, because it's always the ringleader always rises up, the tyrant always rises up and says, it's not us, it's them. There are evil people out there, and what we need to do is rise up and eradicate them. And that's doing the right thing, that's doing a good thing. And it's that compassionate instinct that's being manipulated. We all want to do the right thing, and we want to do the right thing so much, with such power, that we, for some reason, have the ability to put our humanity aside in order to commit acts of total evil, in the feeling that we're doing the right thing. So it's uh, the rising of consciousness is so necessary, because if everyone develops the ability to look inwards and go, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel right about this. Particularly if you're starting to get excited at when some leader is talking and you're getting excited. You hear this rhetoric and you're like, yeah, we got to really do something about this. If you feel that rising up in you, you have to double check and go, hang on, I think I'm being manipulated here. Don't just follow the crowd because following the crowd feels good. We all want to be accepted. Instead of just following that crowd, what if we could all look inwards and go, hang on a minute, nah, I know where this goes. I know where this is leading. Because we often blame the ringleader, we blame the tyrant, but they wouldn't be able to exist if there was no audience. A mob begins life as an audience. An army begins life as an audience. If somebody rose up and was like, right, we all need to take arms and go and kill all these people, if we could say to ourselves, no, that's nah. So give it a rest, mate, because we're busy. We've got stuff to do. We've got actual, real, important work to do. So just you can keep your rhetoric. Thank you. We found a different way. And if we could do that, there'd be no more tyrants. They couldn't exist anymore. The ringleaders couldn't exist anymore if they don't have an audience. That's the place we're going to get to. But that's why it's so important to spread love, joy, light, consciousness. Why it's important to liberate ourselves from our own egoic identification. Because if you don't have an ego, you can't be manipulated. And if everybody got rid of their ego, there'd be no more manipulation. We wouldn't have mob mentality anymore. So, let's say we come to the point where you know all of this. You've begun to liberate yourself from your own individual suffering, and you'll have arrived at many of the insights I just spoke about. You'll have arrived at, and you might even realize that, oh, hang on, I've been doing all of that as well. Like, again, I'm not putting myself above any of this. I'm not saying that I'm a saint and that I've made all of these mistakes. Every single mistake that I ever say, and anything that I'm critical of in other people, I have made those mistakes myself and continue to make them. And I'm trying my best not to, but it happens. So I'm not trying to say I'm above it all and everyone else needs to change. I make the same mistakes too. I just have a idea and a way of trying to overcome this egoic delusion, essentially. So uh, as you grow in awareness and you become more liberated and enlightened, you come across, you understand all of this. You can recognize the fake shallow activism doesn't do anything. Just sharing Facebook posts doesn't do anything. And actually you feel this sense of guilt rising up of like, yeah, well, I say I care about these causes. I say I'm interested in these causes, but I don't do anything. I'm not actually helping in the world. What do I do? What am I going to do? And this leads to many spiritual disciplines having an answer and having an approach. And there's some issues that arise in relation to some of these approaches, because we do have this phenomena of just sort of checking out entirely. After all, when you liberate yourself from suffering, you do become aware that ultimately, consciousness itself is the pure, open, fully empty substratum that exists behind our perceived reality. And so, technically speaking, nothing is actually happening at all. From the perspective of universal consciousness, all is well and nothing is happening. And that's a very difficult thing to reconcile when it comes to the suffering in the world, because we can't invalidate all of this suffering that we see, can we? We can't just go, yeah, but nothing's happening. Oh, well, are you sure? It looks like something is. It looks like people are really, really hurting. So how do we mix these two together? And one thing that happens is that there's some people fall into the trap of this spiritual bypassing, of just saying, oh, okay, there's particular. I'm not throwing shade on any movements or anything, but the neo-advaita movement can be very much like this, in that there are no people, there is no anything, there is no suffering. Just check out entirely and leave the whole thing. Now, if that's the approach somebody wants to take, who am I to stand in the way of that? Because it still liberates that individual from their own individual suffering, and that's enormous. That somebody doing that echoes throughout history. Somebody doing that echoes throughout all of eternity. The benefit of them doing that is immense. So if somebody does that, I'm not going to throw shade on that. And if they want to just fully check out, go and live in a cave. Some of the greatest saints have done this. And some of the greatest saints have made it massive, massive changes in the world without saying or doing anything. They just enlightened and disappeared. And well, as you, if you're fairly advanced in the along the spiritual path, you'll know that they never went anywhere. You know, the Buddha is still here. Jesus is still here. Ramana Maharshi is still here. They didn't go anywhere. It's all still here, and it's all still happening. And there will be countless beings who became liberated, left their body on this earth, and are working behind the scenes 24 hours a day to try desperately to get the world to wake up. And so if somebody takes this path of just checking out entirely, don't feel like they're not doing anything, because they are. And in fact, they're doing more than matey boy and matey girl who jumps on Facebook every day and shares every single post about something going on in the world. However, in my experience, I've tried to do this. I tried to check out completely. And there's something that just feels slightly off about it. I just can't quite reconcile that in myself. Maybe it's different for different individuals, but there's the tiny spectre of doubt just creeps in and says, yeah, but we gotta do something. We gotta do something. So there is this element of the kind of feeling of, like, let go and let God. That is something that, and if that's a stage that you need to go through to find peace, I would highly recommend it. Again, put your own mask on first before dealing with the world, and have some faith that there is a plan, because there is. Ramana Maharshi said, when some, at the time somebody told him about Hitler and what was going on, and Ramana Maharshi said, there is a creator, and the creator takes care of creation. And that was it. That's all he had to say on the subject. And there is a creator. You'll be surprised when you meet the creator, by the way. You'll be very, very surprised. But there is one, and the creator does take care of the creation. So there is a plan, and let go and let God does work, particularly in helping you in the early stages of your awakening process and fully liberating yourself. Because it's highly egoic to think that you're here to save the world. That's what a lot of people are. No, I must be the next big cultural hero, and I am here to save the world and fix all of these issues. That's egoic. That is not compassionate. That is not spiritual. So let go and let God is a very humbling thing to do. It's a surrender, a surrender. But it's not satisfying in the long run, in my experience, my personal experience, to fully check out. Maybe I'll get to that point one day. Until then, there's got to be something that we can do. Got to be. And that brings us to, well, what then? If I can't change the world, I can't fix the entire world. And I feel like no matter how much work I put in, there's just more problems that arise. No matter how many Facebook posts I share, no matter how much I talk about issues, and then even if I put work into certain issues, I don't really feel like I'm making a dent. But there is a paradox here, because the only approach that I have found that reconciles both the need to be compassionate and help alleviate suffering in the world whilst maintaining your own inner peace, whilst maintaining your own liberation and awakening, is actually to take a far smaller approach and to focus on the areas in the world that you can change, which may, on surface level and in the beginning, just appear to be tiny little things. But that will alleviate suffering on a much bigger scale than you could possibly imagine. It could be just being a better father, husband, wife, mother, employee, friend. It could be being a better son or daughter, being a better brother or sister. It could just be the smallest thing, particularly when it comes to just changing something about yourself. If you've become aware that you are quite an angry person and being able to rein that back in, if you've become aware that you're a very jealous person, so just something along those lines, and for just even though these might feel like very small changes, they make a massive, massive difference, bigger than you could possibly imagine. And you have to understand that your skills, there is a reason. There's a reason, a very deep reason you have the particular skills, the particular talents, the particular life experience, the particular situation and circumstance that you have. There is a reason that you have that. Those are the things that you can bring to the world. Don't discount them. Don't just discount. You're like, oh well, I guess I'm good at drawing. Say something like that. I'm not, by the way, but if you are, let's just use that as an example. I'm good at drawing, but that how's that going to help? That's not going to change the world, is it? Like, what? Just because I'm talented at that? No, it does. It does. It makes a massive difference. Don't abandon these things in search of some great and noble cause, because doing those things is what you were called to do. If you have those interests, you have those skills, the talents, and the passion. If you think about the impact that some of the greatest works of art that we've ever seen, it has a massive impact on people. Millions of people have seen certain works of art and it's moved them. It's awoken something in them. It's sparked something in them. And that began with somebody having a talent and an interest in drawing or painting or making this little work of art. Now, at the time when they did that, they might have thought, but this isn't helping with the world's problems. But then they weren't aware that the work of art that they were doing did help with the world's problems. Millions of people saw it, were connected to source for a moment, because that's what art does. It reminds us of beauty and wonder and joy. and has such a massive net positive that it's a beautiful thing that happens. And so, whoever you are listening to this now, you must have some skills, some talents, some interests, some experiences that are of massive value to the world. Massive. You must. And I would say, I know this doesn't sound particularly logical, but focus on that. If you focus on that, you will have a far bigger impact on the world than you could possibly imagine. To take this smaller approach, at first it can feel uncomfortable because you feel like you're ignoring the world's problems. But in many ways, turning on the news and just being subjected to all of these horrible images, and they try and make you all emotional, they try to make you angry, they take your attention by, they know what buttons to push, they try to pollute your consciousness with highly intense emotional experiences. But if you turned away from all of that and instead just focused on producing the best stuff that you can produce, you will be alleviating the problems in the world, because this is what you are called to do. That's why you have the skills, talents, experience, and interests. That's why you have that passion. I believe everyone has a small part of the world that they can help with, And even if it's quite a small, it appears to be a small thing, it can be huge. And I mean, for me, in my experience, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do about so many problems in the world. And so I've left it, because I don't know what to do about the wars that are going on in the world right now. And whenever you listen to this podcast, there'll be a different one going on, or different one on the media at that time. And I'm not a soldier. I'm not a general. I don't know much about politics. I don't know much about socioeconomics. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do about that. I can't help with that. I don't know what to do about cancer. I'm not a doctor. As much as I'd like to be, I'm not. I don't have the intelligence to do that. I don't have the mind to be a doctor. So I don't know what to do about these diseases. I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to do about the problem with resources. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I'm not a scientist. I don't have the brain for it. I don't know. I don't know what to do about the environment. And because I don't know about these things, I can't get involved. Why am I going to go online and start saying this is what the world should do, and start pointing out, oh, everyone's doing everything wrong? I don't know what to do about these things. So how am I supposed to comment on all of that? But here's what I do know. I recovered from alcoholism. Now, alcoholism's a huge problem in the world. Huge. And, well, I recovered from it using a technique that not a lot of people know about. So there's something. I can talk about that. I can try and teach people about that. I recovered from obesity. Obesity is a huge problem in the world. People who are dying of malnutrition because they're eating too much processed garbage. Now, I can help with that because in my experiences, my skills, the passions and talents that I arrived with means that, well, maybe there's something I can do about that. I suffered terribly with anxiety and depression, stress, all of that. I suffered with that. I went through it and overcame it. So maybe in some small way, I could put my work into that. And by focusing on those smaller areas of the world, and I'm sorry, but I don't know what to do about the rest. I don't. I'm not going. I'm not going to sabotage my own inner peace by focusing on problems that I have no power to solve, because I can focus on the bits that I can change, and that's as much as I can do. That is as much as I can do. You matter too. That is the thing to really focus on in life, is understand during this awakening process, as you begin to liberate yourself from suffering, recognize that yes, there is awful suffering in the world, and if you fall into the trap of comparing your suffering to someone else's, you will feel like your own suffering is not valid. And if you feel like your own suffering is not valid, you will not try to overcome it. You will not try to heal, because you will feel like you don't deserve it. You will feel like your pain isn't significant enough to warrant your time, energy, and attention. That is false. Your suffering is important. Your pain is important. You need first to overcome your own individual pain and suffering. Yes, other people suffer. You could say other people suffer more. You could say that people are dealing with worse problems than you, but that does not change the fact that you suffer too. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your emotional health matters. It does. That's the first, that should be priority number one, because if everybody did that, if everybody on earth did that, it wouldn't be long until we didn't have any of these problems anymore. That's how eventually humanity will enlighten and awaken, and these wars will stop, and the problems will stop, will cease. They will just start to fall away in exactly the same way that it happens on the individual level. The suffering is all intense and horrible and chaotic and violent in the early stages. As you find deeper and deeper peace, the suffering subsides, and eventually you just go, oh, where did my suffering go? It's just gone. That's what will happen with humanity if we can raise the global level of inner peace. Inner peace. I tell you, during the pandemic, I ended up in a pretty, not the worst situation, but a pretty awful situation where I was very I was getting low. I was getting quite depressed. Obviously, everyone was, because we were locked down. We were in a lockdown, and and I was suffering with the back pain at the time, and my situation was I didn't know what I was going to do about work and what the future was going to hold, and the whole world was going crazy, and everything was changing. Absolutely everything was changing, and I was utterly isolated. I was so alone. I didn't have a chance to speak to many people at all. We always had to walk around with those masks on and everything. It was chaos. It was a very difficult time. And during that time, you were allowed to get out to go shopping, and you were allowed to get out to exercise, and that was it. That was like twice a day. And there were weeks that were going by where I didn't speak to a single person. But every time I went to the supermarket, and I went to Lidl, which is a supermarket in England for my American listeners, the supermarket called Lidl, and I would go around, and it's creepy and weird because we all have to stay 2 meters apart. Everyone's wearing these masks, and it's all quiet, and it was just odd. And you'd go around and fill your basket up. And every time I went there, there was this cashier. She was on this checkout. And even though we were all wearing masks, I could see that she was smiling underneath. I tell you, team, listen. The clues are everywhere. I didn't plan that line. just then. The clues are everywhere. This is one of them. We've caught one of them live. Okay, this is one of those clues that come in, the intuition that can be gained from some of the clues that the universe gives you. Even though she was wearing a mask, I could see she was smiling underneath. Now, how's that for a metaphor? How is that for a metaphor? Because we're all walking around wearing masks, but some of us are smiling underneath. And I could tell that she was smiling underneath this mask. And I would go to that checkout. And for some reason, she seemed to be there every day that I went in. Every single time that I can remember, I went to that. I mean, the, the line to her checkout was a little bit longer than everyone else's. I mean, doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? But she was smiling underneath that mask, and I would smile back. And she would just chat. We would never mention anything about the pandemic at all. She would just say, "How are you today? What?" And we would chat about the things that I've bought, and I'd say how nice, like I like the some of the food that they have here and how good everything was. And we would just chat about normal things, just the weather and how I was getting on and everything. We never mentioned the pandemic once. And those interactions, they might have been 5 minutes, 10 minutes, every few days or so, but they meant more to me than a lifetime of listening to a spiritual teacher. At that time, those 5 minute chats did more for me than any therapy in the world. The most expensive therapist, the most incredible motivational speaker, the wisest spiritual teacher would not have been able to deliver something more meaningful and beneficial than those little 5-10 minute chats that I had with her over that period of time. Now, there is no way she intended to do that. That's just it was her inner light shining through that was radiating peace. She was smiling underneath the mask. The compassion, the warmth, the love, the joy that emanated. And she didn't have to be like that. There's no law that says you have to be like that. That won't even be in the little employee's handbook. They'll probably suggest it, but it's not mandatory. You don't have to be like that. That's just how she was naturally. That's just her natural state. That's just how she is. And she probably has to put some effort into that, because it's hard work to stay positive, especially in those circumstances. Remember the circumstances? Pandemic. I mean, supermarket workers were one of the only people that were actually working. They were grinding it out. She was probably doing 12-hour days. She didn't have to be all cheerful and smiley and compassionate and nice. It takes work. And she chose to. She chose to. Now, she wasn't out there saving the world from anything, but there will be people that she did save, because she saved me. And she'll probably never know. She'll probably never know. Now, that should tell us something. That should tell us something. That we need to smile from underneath the mask. And eventually the mask can come off and we can smile at each other properly. But this business of we all need to go rushing around trying to save the world will mean nothing eventually. But think how much it would mean to people. Think about what you can do through just the smallest acts. It could just be the chat that you have with someone in the cafe. It could just be choosing to be a little bit more warm, a little bit more compassionate. It could be about just Find your small part of the world to heal and do what you are called to do. And I believe that is the best that we can do in this world. And it might not seem like much, but in the long run, it's huge. Huge. If all our misfortunes were laid in one common heap, whence everyone must take an equal portion, most people would be content to take their own and depart. Yeah, I think I would agree. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all of the new subscribers, all of the likes, all of the comments. Yeah, all of them. Keep them coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe, obviously. All of that. I kind of gotta say that now. Difficult subject. Very difficult subject, this one. How to address the suffering in the world and maintain your own inner peace. Ultimately, as with all of these questions, they're very difficult. They take a lot of working through. They take a lot of understanding. But eventually, you just come to the realization that all is well. And we're all going to make it. We're all going to get there eventually. We are. And do not despair at humanity, because humanity is good. Humanity is good at its heart. We have fallen so far into unconsciousness. We have fallen very deeply and been manipulated and been deceived. But humanity at its heart is good. There is love, there is compassion, there is beauty, there is joy, there is wonder. And there will come a time that humanity has awakened to the point where the suffering doesn't happen anymore. That time is coming. But we have to look inwards. It is you on an individual level healing yourself that will make the difference. It is said the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he doesn't exist. But I believe that's wrong. I believe the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he does exist. Because as long as we can blame an external force, you will not be taking a look inwards at the suffering that you yourself cause unknowingly. After all, who do you think the devil really is? You can do it. You really can. This should be positive. This should be good news. That the best thing you can do for humanity is actually to heal your own trauma, heal your own pain. Get to it. Get to it. You can do it. You really can. Overcome it. Heal it. Heal it. If you heal your own trauma, you remove it from the common pot. That the thing about that Socrates there says about if all of our misfortunes were in one place, we all threw them into the middle. Well, wouldn't it be amazing if you didn't throw anything into the middle? You don't have any suffering to add to the common stock? What if we could remove our own suffering from the common stock? If everyone managed to do that, we'd all be walking around like that beautiful, angelic cashier in Lidl. That's everything I have for you today. That was The Power of Now What, episode 11. Take care, be well, and stay present.